Hello friends, I'm Chadwick Harvey and this is Faithful Performance, where we explore the testimony of the biblical prophets and how they perfectly correlate with the current events of today. Thank you for joining us. Friends, in this episode we're going to discover the mark of the beast. Over the last several decades, the conversation has only escalated about the mark of the beast, the one world religion, the one world government, the one world currency, if you will. And now, since we've had the coronavirus affect the entire globe, this conversation has only escalated in the recent weeks, in the recent months on social media, also in the prophetic prophecy realms, so to speak, and in the churches, if you will. So I thought it was very important to go through the mark of the beast to understand the beast kingdom, where this beast is located, because that's where the mark will come from. And then also, does the Antichrist rule the entire globe? And then we'll get into the mark of the beast itself in the scriptures of Revelation. So it's important as we look at the mark of the beast to have the right theology of it. And the first thing that we're going to discover is where the beast kingdom is. Again, the mark of the beast will be where the beast is. So it's important to see who this beast is and where it is located in the globe. So we're going to begin with Revelation 13. In Revelation 13, 1 through 2, it says, "And I saw a beast come up out of the sea with 10 horns and 7 heads. On its horns were 10 royal crowns, and on its heads blasphemous names. The beast which I saw was like a leopard, but with feet of those of a bear, and a mouth like a mouth of a lion. To it the dragon gave its power, its throne, and great authority." So John describes this beast that comes out of the sea, and it's very important to understand the geography that he's mentioned. He says one beast comes up out of the sea, which it means the Mediterranean Sea, the Great Sea. Most biblical scholars and prophecy teachers will agree with this. He's speaking of the Mediterranean Sea, so he's putting this beast kingdom already in around the Mediterranean Sea, the Great Sea. Then he goes on to describe it having 10 horns, okay? Well, this is the 10 kings of the Antichrist kingdom, the beast kingdom, because it goes on to say that they were crowned. They had crowns on their heads, so to speak, or on the beast kingdom. So it's important to understand that the 10 kings of the beast kingdom will be, as he says, coming out of the sea in the Mediterranean area. And then he describes it for us, which gives us more insight when we look back to the prophets of the Old Testament, the Tanakh. He says it is a lion, a bear, and a leopard. He says it's those 3 animals which are symbolic for kingdoms. Again, he's speaking of 10 kings, and then he describes the land area that it will be in, the conglomerate land area of those 3 kingdoms of a lion, a bear, and a leopard. So now we have to understand, who are these 3 kingdoms, okay? Again, the Holy Bible will be very consistent, and it has to have 2 or 3 witnesses to be established. What John saw in the book of Revelation, we can find in the Torah and the prophets, okay? What he saw will always be confirmed by the biblical prophets and also the Torah. Deuteronomy 19:15 says, by the witness of 2 or 3, it will be established, okay? So this carries us back. He wrote this prophecy. John wrote this prophecy for a reason. He wrote it specifically and labeled the beast kingdom as a lion, a bear, and a leopard for a specific reason, because that carries us back to Daniel 7. Okay, and when we read Daniel 7, we'll see the correlation between these two, and it will give us great insight of where the beast kingdom is, and then we can start to understand where about the mark of the beast, if you will. In Daniel 7, it states, "I had a vision at night, and I saw there before me the 4 winds of the sky breaking out over the great sea. And 4 huge animals came up out of the sea, each different from the others. The first was like a lion, then there was another one, a second one like a bear. After this I looked, and there was another one like a leopard, with 4 bird wings on its side. After this I looked up in the night visions, and there before me was the 4th animal, dreadful, horrible, and extremely strong, and with great iron teeth. It devoured, crushed, and stamped its feet on what was left. It was different from all the other animals that had gone before it, and it had 10 horns. While I was considering the horns, another horn sprang up among them, a little horn, before which 3 of the horns were plucked out by the roots. In this horn were eyes like human eyes, and a mouth speaking arrogantly. So Daniel gives us this understanding, and this correlates with the Revelation 13 beast. Okay, the Revelation 13 beast was one beast with 3 kingdoms in it, if we remember correct. So then we look at Daniel 7, and he describes 4 kingdoms that will rise to power, in my mind, at the end of the age, and he describes them. The first one is a lion, the second one is a bear, the third one is a leopard. Well, that's the exact same kingdoms that John described in Revelation 13. He said it was a lion, a bear, and a leopard. So we have a beautiful match there that's telling us that the beast kingdom, the Revelation 13 one beast, will be a conglomerate of the lion, the bear, the leopard in Daniel 7's first 3 kingdoms. Okay, and then he goes on to describe this 4th kingdom, which Daniel 7's 4th kingdom is the same beast kingdom as the Revelation 13 because it has 10 horns. Okay, so we have a beautiful match there that correlates both of these. Both came out of the sea. Okay, the Mediterranean, the Great Sea. He's putting the geography in the Middle East and North Africa. They both have 10 horns, which means the 10 kings of the Antichrist kingdom. And Daniel's telling us that these first 3 kingdoms will rise to power at the end of the age. And most will believe, most prophecy teachers, most biblical scholars will agree with me that the first one, the lion, is Babylon. The second one is Medo-Persia. The third one is Greece, or Yavon is the correct term for it. It says Greece in your Bibles, but it's really Yavon, okay? So we have to understand that these, you can think of their modern names as Iraq, Iran, and Turkey, okay? That's where Yavon is in Western Turkey. So what Daniel and John is telling us is that the conglomerate land area of these 3 kingdoms, these ancient kingdoms, these land areas that they controlled, will be the 10 kings of the Antichrist kingdom. So again, Revelation 13's one beast, okay, the lion, the bear, the leopard, the conglomerate of Daniel 7's first 3 kingdoms, okay? Well, then he goes on to describe, Daniel 7 goes on to describe the 4th beast. He says he has 10 horns, okay? And it's going to be the conglomerate because we have a match there with the 10 horns of Daniel 7's 4th beast and also Revelation 13's one beast, okay? So it's just that conglomerate land area. Okay, so we have to understand what the Babylonian Empire, the Medo-Persian Empire, the Grecian Empire, the land area that they controlled, because that's where the 10 kings are going to be. He specifically says that, okay? So it's important for us to understand that, and both of them came out of the sea, and then we have this little horn. So we're going to have the 10 kings first, okay, of the Antichrist kingdom, the beast kingdom rise, and then the little horn, then the Antichrist rises after the 10 kings are in place, and he plucks out, or he conquers 3 kings, okay? Well, Daniel 11, 40 through 43 tells us who the 3 kings are that he plucks out. It's Egypt, it's Libya, and it's also Sudan. And we'll read those scriptures later when we confirm, does the Antichrist rule the entire world? So it's important for us to understand these scriptures together, the geography of them, and how Revelation 13 describes one beast. It's a lion, a bear, a leopard. Those 3 kingdoms will make up the Antichrist kingdom. Okay, he described them that way for a reason, the beast kingdom. So we can go back to Daniel 7 and understand the first 3 beasts, which are the same exact ones that will make up the Antichrist kingdom. And then he goes into this 4th beast. It will be dreadful. It will be terrible. It will crush all of the other, the land area, if you will. It will control all of that area. The 10 kings, that will be the one world government. That will be the one world currency. That will be where the mark of the beast will come from. So the mark of the beast will come from the beast kingdom, and that beast kingdom will be in the Middle East and North Africa, just like Revelation 13 says, and then also Daniel 7 says as well through the 4 kingdoms. We have to understand that the biblical prophets were speaking about the biblical world. When we read the Old Testament prophecies, okay, of the biblical prophets, they would have understood the table of nations in Genesis 10 and 11. Okay, so they're thinking of the biblical world that, they didn't know about America or Australia, okay, or Japan or anything like that, or even London, so to speak. So they understood the biblical world. And John himself, even though he lived in the Roman Empire, he would have reverted back to the way that they looked at it as well, because he's confirming, again, 2 or more witnesses that will be established. Okay, so he is going to confirm what Daniel, what Jeremiah, what Isaiah, what Ezekiel saw. He's going to confirm those in his prophecies as well. Okay, so it's important to understand we have to put our mind towards the biblical prophet's mind and get into their mindset, and they would have understood the table of nations, Genesis 10 and 11, and that's how they wrote the prophecies for us to understand. We have to understand these ancient names the way that they understood it. And even though the names have changed throughout the years, like Babylon is Iraq, Medo-Persia is Iran, so to speak, we have to understand the way that they were going to look at it when they were writing the prophecies for the Almighty. So now let's go into the interpretation of Daniel 7's fourth beast. This is when an angel came to him. We read the dream or the vision. Now let's go into the interpretation to get more insight and confirmation that we're looking at this correctly. In verse 19 it says, "Then I wanted to know what the fourth beast meant, the one that was different from all the other ones, so very terrifying, with iron teeth and bronze nails, which devoured and crushed and stamped its feet on what was left, what the 10 horns on the head meant, and the other horn which sprang up before which 3 fell, the horn that had eyes and mouth speaking arrogantly seemed greater than the others. I watched, and that horn, which is the little horn, Antichrist, made war with the holy ones, which is Israel, the Jewish people, and was winning until the ancient one came. Judgment was given in favor of the holy ones of the Most High, and the time came for the holy ones to take over the kingdom." This is what was said. "The fourth animal will be a fourth kingdom on earth. It will be different from the other kingdoms. It will devour the whole earth, trample it down, and crush it. As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings will arise, and yet another will rise after them. Now he will be different from the early ones, and he will put down 3 kings. He will speak words against the Most High and try to exhaust the holy ones of the Most High. He will attempt to alter the seasons and the law, Torah, and the holy ones will be handed over to him for a time, times and a half a time, 3.5 years. But when the court goes into session, he will be stripped of his rulership, which will be consumed and completely destroyed. The kingdom, the rulership and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven will be given to the holy people of the Most High. Their kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all rulers will serve and obey them." So the interpretation of the angel in Daniel 7's fourth beast confirms what we discussed before. We look at it, he says it has iron teeth, okay, and bronze nails. Well, that's taking us to Daniel 2. I believe Daniel 2 and Daniel 7 mirror each other, okay? Because remember, the fourth kingdom in Daniel 2 is the iron, okay? So it's confirming Daniel 2, the fourth beast, and Daniel 7's fourth beast is the exact same. And then what we see in Daniel 2, the stone comes and it crushes all of them together. Okay, well then Daniel 7, we're seeing this judgment made by the Almighty for Messiah to come to crush them, and then we inherit the kingdom of the millennial kingdom, if you will, the Jewish kingdom. Okay, but it confirms that the fourth the fourth animal will be a fourth kingdom that will be on earth. It has 10 horns, remember. It goes back into Revelation 13's one beast, okay, that we've confirmed. 10 horns, 10 horns. We have a beautiful match there. And then it devours the whole earth, okay. So this is where people believe that the Antichrist rules the entire earth, because it says that it will devour the whole earth and trample it down and crush it, okay? So we have to understand that it's talking about the whole earth of the biblical world, and we're going to confirm this as we go forward, but he's speaking of the biblical world. And again, we're about to confirm that, and then it goes on to say that there was 10 horns out of this kingdom. The fourth kingdom will have 10 kingdoms, or 10 kings, okay, which confirms Revelation 13's 10 horns, 10 kings as well. So again, it's confirming again, it's the second witness that this fourth kingdom in Daniel 7 is the exact same kingdom in Revelation 13, 1 through 2, the beast kingdom, the lion, the bear, the leopard. Those three kingdoms, those three land areas, which will be the 10 kings of the Antichrist kingdom, but then the judgment will be rendered and the Messiah will come after the 3.5 years. He's given authority over the world in 3.5 years, and then the Messiah comes. Most people understand the last 3.5 years to be the Great Tribulation. That goes back into Matthew 24. The abomination of desolation tells the people to flee. Then the Antichrist will have authority over that for 42 months or 3.5 years. So this is where people get the entire world the Antichrist will rule over, and I would disagree with that because of what we're about to discover. But we're going to continue now in Revelation 13, 5 through 10, which will confirm what we just read in Daniel 7 as well with the 3.5 years. So I want to match these two prophecies together, Revelation 13, also Daniel 7. And then we're going to get into the scriptures which will prove that the Antichrist does not rule the entire globe. Okay, he rules over that biblical world, if you will, the 10 kings of the Antichrist kingdom that we're speaking of. In Revelation 13, 5 through 10, it says, "It was giving a mouth speaking arrogant blasphemies." Again, he's talking about the Revelation 13 beast. Remember, the one beast with the 10 horns, which is the same as Daniel 7's fourth beast. He's speaking of Antichrist. Okay, and it was given authority to him for 42 months. Again, 3.5 years. So it opened its mouth in blasphemies against God to insult his name and his tabernacle and those living in heaven. It was allowed to make war on God's holy people and to defeat them. It was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. Everyone living on earth will worship it, except those names written in the book of life, belonging to the Lamb slaughtered before the foundation of the world. Those who have ears, let them hear. If anyone is meant for captivity, into captivity he goes. If anyone is to be killed with the sword he is to be killed. This is when God's holy people must persevere and trust. So again, we have the same language, the same context that we find in Daniel 7's fourth beast. Okay, the same exact language. He rules for 3.5 years. This beast kingdom, the lion, the bear, the leopard, those three kingdoms, the three land areas of the Middle East where the 10 kings will be, that's where he rules for 42 months, 3.5 years. So again, it matches perfectly with Daniel 7's fourth beast. Okay, he makes war with the holy people. He makes blasphemies against the Most High. And then it goes on to say he has authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. Everyone living on earth will worship him except those that's written in the book of life. So this is where people get that the Antichrist rules the entire world. But as we see, he plucks out 3 kings. He conquers 3 kings, which is Egypt, Libya, and Sudan, okay? And then the other 7 kings will be under his authority, okay, over there. That's the entirety that it mentions is those 10 kings of the Antichrist kingdom. So whenever he's speaking of the whole world or every tribe, every tongue, every nation, this is the same language that we find in the biblical prophets, okay? And we're going to go through these and we have to ask ourselves, did these kingdoms rule the entire world, the entire globe? Okay, so we're going to understand that it's kind of like hyperbole, okay, with the prophets, that they were just making a statement that he is that supreme, he is that dominant in the biblical world over the 10 kings and in that area of the Middle East and North Africa. Okay, so it's very important to understand. And remember, he has only 42 months. He's only given power for 3.5 years. So for someone to rule the world, to conquer the world in 3.5 years, that's a tall task to handle, so to speak, again. And it's about the everlasting covenants. He's not really concerned about New York City or Hong Kong or London or anywhere else. He's concerned about Jerusalem. He's concerned about the everlasting covenants, the Abrahamic, the Davidic, the new covenant. He comes against the holy covenant, which is the Abrahamic covenant, the land, the glorious land. He's concerned about defeating Messiah and coming against God Almighty. He's not really concerned about the rest of the Gentile nations because his time is short, as we read in Revelation 12. His time is short when he's thrown out of heaven. Satan is for 3.5 years. His goal is the biblical world, and his ultimate goal is Jerusalem, Mount Zion. He's trying to come against the Most High. He's trying to come against Messiah. So we have to understand that could he have influence over the world? Okay, maybe, but in my mind, he has the biblical world, and I think we're about to show that in the scriptures. In Daniel 3, 4 through 7, this is Nebuchadnezzar when he set up the image of gold for himself. Okay, this is in verse 3. It says, the viceroys, the prefects, governors, judges, treasurers, counselors, sheriffs, and all the officials assembled for the dedication of the statue of Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. They stood in front of the statue that Nebuchadnezzar had set up, and a herald proclaimed, peoples, nations, languages, you are ordered that when you hear the sound of the horn, the pipe, harp, the lute, the bagpipe, and the rest of the musical instruments, you fall down and worship the gold statue that Nebuchadnezzar the king has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship is to be thrown immediately into a blazing hot furnace. Therefore, when all the peoples heard the sound of the horn, pipe, harp, zither, lute, and the rest of the musical instruments, all the peoples, nations, and languages fell down and worshiped the gold statue that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. So this is important. This goes back to what we're just discussing. Nebuchadnezzar did not rule the entire world. He only ruled in the Middle East. Okay, so we have to understand when the prophets are writing these things, it's writing the supremacy of his kingdom in the Middle East, the dominance of his superpower. Okay, all the nations around trembled him, I'm sure, but he was dominant in the Middle East. His kingdom only was in the Middle East. So when it says peoples, nations, languages, that was just the way it was written to confirm the dominance of his superpower. All the peoples, nations, and languages, it continues to say. So let me ask you this, if they all fell down and worshiped the statue, well, how tall was the statue for the entire world to see? I mean, is someone going to see this thing from hundreds and thousands of miles away and bow down? Do they have microphones in every country, blasting out the sound so that they can worship the image that reaches up to heaven? Of course not. I know I'm exaggerating tremendously right now. Of course not. There was a statue in place in the province of Babylon when the music was played or when the sound was created. That's when they bowed down. Of course, all the other tribes and nations that were outside of Babylon, outside of Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom, did not hear the sound. They did not worship that. It's just the way that prophecy was written. It was the dominance of his superpower, so to speak. In Daniel 4, verse 1 and 22, it says, Nebuchadnezzar the king, unto all people, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied unto you. In verse 22, it goes on to continue to say, it is thou, O king, that art grown and become strong. For thy greatness is grown and reaches up to heaven, and thy dominion to the end of the earth. So we have to understand this as well. Did his kingdom literally go up to heaven? Of course not. It's hyperbole. It was just showing the dominance of his superpower. Did it reach to the end of the earth? No. He only ruled in the Middle East and North Africa, or in the Middle East area. Okay, so we have to understand that this is just the way the prophecies were written for the dominance of their superpower, for us to understand that he was the most dominant. And of course, literally, he did not reach up to heaven and obviously to the ends of the earth, because his kingdom only was in the Middle East. In Daniel 5, 17 through 19, this gives us another understanding as well. This is when Daniel was speaking to Belshazzar, which is the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar, and he was speaking of King Nebuchadnezzar, okay, which confirms what we're saying. In Daniel 17, it says, then Daniel answered and said before the king, let your gifts be for yourself and give your rewards to another. Yet I will read the writing on the wall for you, O king, and make known to him the interpretation. O king, the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar, your father, a kingdom and majesty, glory, and honor. And because of the majesty that he gave him, all peoples, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. So actually, Daniel proves what we're saying before, that all the nations surely did fear him and trembled before him. He didn't say he ruled all over them. Okay, so he confirms in this passage to Belshazzar, which is Nebuchadnezzar's grandson. We all remember the writing on the wall that night. Then the Medo-Persian Empire conquered the Babylonian Empire. But it just goes to show you that there was other kingdoms in place, and that Nebuchadnezzar was the dominant superpower of that time. Okay, in Daniel 6, we get more confirmation of this. In Daniel 6, 1 through 3, it says, Darius decided to set up over the kingdom 120 viceroys to rule throughout the entire kingdom, with 3 chiefs over them, whom Daniel was one, so that these viceroys could be responsible to them and that they could be in the king's interest, would be safeguarded. But because an extraordinary spirit was in Daniel, he so distinguished himself above all the other chiefs and the viceroys that the king considered putting him in charge of the whole kingdom. Okay, now in verse 25 through 26, it says, King Darius wrote all the peoples, nations, and languages living anywhere on earth, Shalom Rav, which is abundant peace. I hereby issue a decree that everyone in my kingdom, or everywhere in my kingdom, people are to tremble and be in awe of the God of Daniel, for he is the living God. He endures forever. His kingdom will never be destroyed. His rulership will last till the end. So again, this confirms what we're saying. Okay, King Darius, he opens up with, wrote all the peoples, nations, and languages living anywhere on earth. Again, it was just the way of the opening statement of all of these letters, of all of these opening statements, if you will, all of these decrees that were given. This was kind of like just the opening statement, just to show the supremacy of that kingdom of that time. And then he continues to elaborate, I hereby issue a decree that everywhere in my kingdom. Okay, so of course he didn't control the other kingdoms. Okay, the Medo-Persian Empire only controlled the Middle East, okay, and North Africa, if you will. Okay, so again, they were dominant. Babylon was dominant, Middle East, Medo-Persian, Middle East, North Africa. Okay, so again, we have to understand the way the prophecies were written for the dominant superpower of the Middle East, all nations, all tribes, all tongues. It goes back into the biblical world is what he's speaking of, okay? And this is very important for us to understand. Remember, the Antichrist kingdom is 10 kings. We already described 3 of them will be Egypt, Sudan, and Libya. So we have to understand that that's 3 of the 10 kings right there, and we'll get into the other 4 here in a minute. So we have to understand that what has been is what will be, what has been done will be done. There is nothing new under the sun. The biblical world is where it began. The biblical world is where it will end. I'm not saying other nations will not be involved in it on a secondary level. Of course so. You know, America, Britain, Russia, etc. Of course we will. But however, it's talking about the primary area. The beast kingdom will be the Babylonian, Medo-Persian, and Grecian Empire's land area, just like John said in Revelation 13. Okay, the last one we'll get into to prove that they're speaking of the biblical world is in Daniel 8. Okay, Daniel 8 is a prophecy written for the end of the age. It speaks of 2 beasts, okay, a ram and a goat. The ram is Iran or Persia, and the goat is Turkey or Yavon. Okay, well, we're just going to pick up where the hyperbole is mentioned again in Daniel 8:5. It says, I was beginning to understand when a male goat came from the west, passing over the whole earth without touching the ground. So again, he's speaking of the male goat, Turkey, when they go to attack Iran, okay, Medo-Persia. We have to understand Yavon, Turkey, is Western Turkey, and it says he comes from the west, okay, over to attack the ram, Iran. Well, he didn't go to America and then come back over, okay, over the whole earth. Okay, again, it's hyperbole. Why would Turkey go to London or go to America and then have to come back to Iran? It doesn't make any sense. Again, Daniel's given us this hyperbole, just mentions the dominance that this goat will have over the entire earth, okay? He does not go over the entire earth. He goes from Turkey to Iran, okay, in that area. He does not go over the whole earth and circle the globe, so to speak, okay? So we have to understand they're giving us hyperbole, they're giving us the dominance of the specific empire they're speaking of, and that's the way we need to understand it. The Antichrist does not rule the entire world, okay? He rules the 10 kings of the Middle East and North Africa. Will he have influence around? Okay, we'll see what happens, but the primary area, the area that he's concerned with, are the 10 kings of the Middle East and North Africa. That will be the one world religion. That will be the one world currency. That will be where the mark of the beast will come from, okay? So it's very important to understand that the Antichrist does not even control all of the Middle East, okay? He doesn't even control in the entire Middle East. So how could he control the entire world if he doesn't even control the Middle East? Okay, so we find that in Daniel 11, 27 through 30. And it's speaking of two kings, the king of the north and the king of the south. In verse 27, it says, these two kings, which is the king of the north, Turkey, the king of the south is Egypt, bent on mischief, will sit at the same table, speaking lies to each other, but none of this will succeed, because the appointed time will not have come yet. Then the king of the north, Turkey, will return to his own land with great wealth, with his heart set against the holy covenant, the Abrahamic covenant. He will take action and then return home. At the time designated, he will come back to the south, which is Egypt. By this time, things will turn out differently than before, because ships from Kittim will come against him, so that his courage will fail him. Then in retreat, he will take furious action against the Holy Covenant, the Abrahamic Covenant, again showing favor to those who abandon the Holy Covenant. Armed forces will come at his order and profane the sanctuaries and the fortress. They will abolish the daily burnt offering and set up the abomination that causes desolation. So Daniel gives us this understanding. This is a vision for the time of the end. Okay, this is the Antichrist, if you will. Okay, so you got the king of the north, Turkey, king of the south, Egypt. They come against each other, okay, in this war. This is right before the abomination of desolation, because Daniel ends this with the abomination of desolation, which begins the last 3.5 years. So it puts us in that time frame, okay, and look where he's interested in. He's against the Holy Covenant, okay? He's not against the U.S. Constitution. He's not against the Parliament in London. He's against the Holy Covenant. He's against the Abrahamic Covenant. Okay, and it's mentioned over and over, the glorious land, so to speak. And it says the ships from Kittim come against him. Some would put this as Cyprus. Others would put this in maybe the Rome area or the coastlands, okay, so to speak. But it does not go westward towards America or anything like that, or even London, in my opinion. Okay, it's talking about these things come against him. These people come against him, and look, he retreats from them. He retreats from the wars of the ships of Kittim, if you will. Okay, so he doesn't control the entire world. And then he goes against the Holy Covenant, the Abrahamic covenant of the glorious land, which we mentioned before. That is his priority. Then he sets up the abomination of desolation, and then he has power for 42 months, and he pours out his wrath. The Antichrist does for 3.5 years. Okay, in Daniel 11, 36 through 45, we'll get more confirmation as well. It says this, and this is speaking of the Antichrist as well. In verse 36, it says, the king will do as he pleases. He will exalt himself and consider himself greater than any god, and he will utter blasphemies against the God of gods. He will prosper only until the period of wrath is over, for what has been determined must take place. He will show no respect for the gods his ancestors worshipped, or for the God of women, or for the women. He won't show any respect for any god, because he will consider himself greater than all of them. We found this in Revelation 13 and also in Daniel 7. In verse 38, it says, but instead he will honor the God of strongholds, which is a God of war, a God of Jihad. With gold, silver, precious stones, and other costly things, he will honor a God unknown to his ancestors. He will deal with the strongest fortresses with the help of a foreign god. He will confer honor on those he acknowledges, causing them to rule over many and distributing land as a reward. When the time for the end comes, the king of the south, Egypt, will push against him, while the king of the north will attack him like a whirlwind with chariots, cavalry, and a large navy. He will invade countries, overrun them, and move on. He will enter into the land of glory, which is Israel, and many will come to grief, but these will be saved from his power: Edom, Moab, and the people of Ammon. He will control the treasures of gold and silver. It says he will reach out his hand to seize other countries too. The land of Egypt will not escape. He will control the treasures of gold and silver, as with everything else in Egypt of value. Put, which is Libya, and Ethiopia, which is really Sudan and Cush, will be subject to him. However, news from the east and the north will frighten him so that he moves out in great fury to ruin and completely do away with many. Finally, when he pitches the tents of his palace between the seas and the mountain of the holy glory, he will come to his end, but no one will help him. So again, Daniel gives us an understanding that he does not control the entire world. He describes the Antichrist. He will be a God of fortresses, of strongholds, of war, of jihad, if you will, with gold, precious stones, etc. And then he will deal with the strongest fortresses. So again, if the strongest fortresses come against him, he's dealing with them. That means people are coming against him. The kings of the east will come against him, if you will. Okay, so he does not control the entire world. In fact, it says when the time of ends comes, the king of the south will come against him. That's Egypt. Well, Isaiah 19, the Lord says he will turn them over to a cruel master, which is the Antichrist. So he, again, like we've discussed before, he controls or he conquers Egypt. He conquers Put, which is Libya. He conquers Sudan. It says Ethiopia, but that's Cush, and that is Sudan in today's world. Okay, he conquers those three kings. Those three kings he plucks out. Remember Daniel 7. Okay, he conquers three kings. Well, those are the three kings that we've mentioned: Egypt, Libya, Sudan. Okay, again, Middle East, North Africa. It's where these countries are that he controls. And then it says that Jordan, which is Moab, Ammon, okay, Seir, this is where Jordan is. It gets Edom, it gets away from him. He does not control even Jordan. Okay, so how can he control the whole world if he doesn't even control Jordan? Okay, Moab, Edom, okay, if you will. So it's important for us to read these prophecies in their proper context and understand, first of all, that John in Revelation 13 is saying there's one beast coming out of the sea, the Mediterranean. He's got 10 kings, and it's going to be the lion, the bear, the leopard. Then we go back to Daniel 7, and it's going to be the lion, the bear, the leopard, okay, the first three kingdoms. And then that fourth kingdom will be the conglomerate, and it's the same kingdom as Revelation 13 because it has the 10 horns. So he's telling us that the Antichrist will rule the 10 kings in the biblical world, okay, that they would have understood when they were written these prophecies. Okay, and then it says, this in the last of the prophecy in verse 44, it says, news from the east and the north. Again, news from the east, the kings of the east. From the north, that could be Russia, but it never mentions the west. It never mentions America or European countries at all. And going to the European countries in Rome, Rome's mentioned about 14 or 15 times in the scriptures, and not one time is it mentioned in destruction or in God's wrath, if you will, or any kind of wrath. But what is mentioned in wrath is all of the Islamic countries that are around them. Edom, okay, Moab, okay, with judgment from the Almighty. Lydia, Tyre, Sidon, which is Lebanon, okay, Turkey. All of these ancient names are pointing to the Islamic nations that the Lord's going to pour out his wrath literally when he comes for his judgment. Egypt, gets judged as well. So all of these countries that we're seeing prophet by prophet, the judgment of the nations, Isaiah 13 through 23, Ezekiel 28 through 32, Jeremiah 46 through 52, the judgment of the nations, every one of them are Islamic today. So he pours out his wrath upon them. Now the whole world is going to be judged by the judgments in the book of Revelation, but God's specific wrath, his sword, his fire. Okay, Isaiah 63, he's coming from Edom with bloody garments, from Bozrah, bloody garments. Okay, he comes in a cloud from Egypt. We have to understand that this is a biblical war, okay, that we're talking about of the way that they would have understood it in the old biblical way, okay? So we have to understand that. That's not saying judgment's going to be poured out on all nations. Yes, that is for sure. But when it comes to the Messiah, when it comes to his wrath, his sword, his fire, it is going to be concentrated on Assyria, on Turkey, on Jordan, on Egypt, on Sudan, on Egypt, everything like that. Over and over and over, prophet by prophet, it goes through that, and we have to understand that. Okay, in verse 45 it says he pitches his tent, okay, of his palace between the seas and the mountain of the holy glory, okay, and he will come to his end. So think about that, between the seas. Well, the two seas that are mentioned in the scriptures are the Mediterranean Sea and the Dead Sea. The two seas, the holy mountains in between those. It's not talking about the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean, okay, in the middle of Missouri somewhere. It's not talking about that. It's talking about between the Mediterranean and the Dead Sea. He's going to pitch his tents because it's against the Holy Covenant. It's against the land area of the Abrahamic covenant, against the promise to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and David. Okay, the Abrahamic, the Davidic, the New Covenant, against the Messiah. This is a biblical war of the way that they would have looked at it in times of the biblical prophets, okay? So it's important for us to understand that. So now that we've understood Revelation 13, Daniel 7's fourth beast is the same, the geography of that Antichrist kingdom, the 10 kings, we understand that the Antichrist does not rule the entire world. He doesn't even rule the entire Middle East, okay? Now let's go into the mark of the beast. Okay, so now that we understand the beast kingdom, the mark will come from that kingdom. Okay, in Revelation 13, 11 through 18, we get wisdom of the mark of the beast. It says in verse 11, "Then I saw another beast coming out of the earth. It had 2 horns like those of a lamb, but it spoke like a dragon. It exercises all the authority of the first beast in its presence, and it makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, the one whose fatal wound has been healed. It performs great miracles, even causing fire to come down from heaven onto the earth as people watch. It deceives the people living on earth by the miracles it is allowed to perform in the presence of the beast, and it tells them to make an image honoring the beast that was struck by the sword but came alive again. It was allowed to put breath into the image of the beast so that the image of the beast could even speak. And it was allowed to cause anyone who would not worship the image of the beast to be put to death. Also, it forces everyone, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on his right hand or on his forehead, preventing anyone from buying or selling unless he has the mark, that is, the name of the beast or the number of its name. This is where wisdom is needed. Those who understand should count the number of the beast, for it is a number of a person, and its number is 666. So we have to understand that this is where the mark of the beast is. This is the second beast. Most people would identify this as the false prophet that goes along with the Antichrist, if you will. He has the same powers. He calls fires from heaven. He makes everybody worship the image of the beast, which is very interesting because we're going to see this in the book of Daniel as well, the prophetic foreshadow, and it makes an image honoring the beast, okay, that was struck by the sword that came alive again. Okay, that's for another lesson, how the wound was healed and all that stuff with the head. Okay, but then it says it was allowed to put breath into the image of the beast so that the image of the beast could even speak, which is interesting. And then it gets into the mark of the beast. It forces the great, the small, the rich and the poor, the free and the slave to receive the mark on the right hand or on the forehead, preventing anyone from buying or selling, okay, etc. So we have to understand that this is the mark of the beast will be from the Antichrist kingdom, the beast kingdom, when it is set up. So whenever we look and we see all the conversation about the microchip and about the one world government, the one world religion, the one world currency, and all of these things, that is nonsense because it's going to be in the biblical world. It's kind of like the Antichrist. When people start speculating on who the Antichrist is, whoever it may be, that's just false because no one knows who the Antichrist is right now because the 10 kings have to be in place first. And then the Antichrist rises, just like we've read in Daniel 7. Okay, so there's 10 kings in place. Then the Antichrist rises, and then he conquers 3 of the 10 kings. Okay, so until that time, we can look, and it's okay to look and watch and look at the Middle East and North Africa to see a leader that rises to power very quickly. But until the 10 kings come into place, we will not know for sure because he's going to rise after the 10 kings are in place. So we have to, it's okay to watch, and it's awesome to watch and to understand these things, but we have to be very responsible. We have to be very careful. And could the Antichrist use the microchip to put into the right hand and into the forehead? Okay, that's fine. That's great. It's almost kind of like the deal of the century, if you want to go there with a microchip, or a deal in place that the Antichrist uses to confirm and establish. Okay, so I'm all about that. If that's what it's going to be, that's fine. But the current microchip is not it, because guess what? The beast kingdom is not in place yet. So once the beast kingdom comes in place, the 10 kings, then we see the Antichrist. Then the mark of the beast will come about at the 3.5-year mark, because that's when he has authority for 42 months. Okay, so we're really going to understand it then when the 10 kings come in place, the Antichrist rises, he conquers 3 kings, Egypt, Libya, Sudan, and then the beast kingdom will be into play with the mark of the beast, so to speak. And that's when everybody will have to receive the mark. Because remember, he comes in peace in the beginning, and then he shows himself for 42 months, the abomination of desolation that Messiah mentioned in Matthew 24. It goes back into Daniel as well with that, Daniel 9. Okay, with the abomination of desolation, Daniel 11. That's when the mark of the beast will be in play. Could it be the microchip? Okay, we'll have to see what happens with that. Some believe that it will be kind of similar to what the Islamics wear today, with the headband across their head, and also on the badge on their right arm that says there's no other God than Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger. Okay, so it is a creed, if you will. So my personal opinion that it is going to be a creed, is going to be an allegiance to the beast, the Antichrist kingdom, if you will, the beast itself. Remember, he's all about himself, okay? He's going to exalt himself, okay? And it's going to be allegiance to him. So it's going to be very similar to the badge that they wear on their right arms today or on their forehead. It's going to be very similar. It's a creed, okay? We can think of it as our creed, you know, as believers, Emmanuel, God with us. That's our creed that we have. He is with us. The Holy Spirit dwells within us, okay? We can think of the same way that he's going to have a creed in place, that he's going to have people have allegiance to him on their foreheads, on their right arms. And until that time, we will not understand that until the beast kingdom rises. So yes, all of these things are foreshadows in place. The conversations, the one world government, the one world religion, okay, the mark of the beast, all of these are very valid conversations to have, but we have to be responsible, because Bill Gates is not the Antichrist, okay, or anyone else, okay, anyone else who's trying to play this card with the microchip. And again, it will be a decision to make at that time to buy or sell. So if someone gets a microchip now, I don't believe that they're part of the beast kingdom or the mark of the beast. I just personally don't believe that. Now, I personally am not going to take a microchip or a vaccine or anything. But if, for those who do take the microchip, I personally do not believe they've taken the mark of the beast. There's no scriptural basis for that. When the 10 kingdoms come to play, the Antichrist kingdom, the beast kingdom, that's when the mark of the beast will come at the 3.5-year mark. And then there will be a decision to make on those believers, those non-believers that are in that Antichrist system, if you will. Could it have influence upon the nations? We'll have to wait and see. But the primary area that he's concerned about is the Middle East and North Africa, primarily Jerusalem, because that's where the Holy Covenant is. When you read Daniel 11, he goes against the Holy Covenant. The Abrahamic Covenant, which is the Davidic Covenant, expounds upon that, and then also the New Covenant. They all work together in unison, like we spoke about on other videos. So friends, it's very important. In summary, it's important to understand the mark of the beast, but it's important to understand the geography of the beast kingdom, okay? So because there's so much misinformation out there, okay? So we have to go by the biblical prophets. John's going to revert us back to Daniel, okay? The beast kingdom, the one beast in Revelation, is a lion, a bear, and a leopard. Those 3 kingdom land areas, okay? Ancient land areas. He's going to revert us back to Daniel 7. The first 3 kingdoms is a lion, a bear, a leopard. Babylon, Persia, Greece, or Yavon, those land areas. Okay, and then he says the 4th beast is going to be a conglomerate, because Daniel 7's 4th beast has 10 horns, comes out of the sea. In Revelation 13, that one beast comes out of the sea, and it's a conglomerate of the first 3 kingdoms of Daniel 7. And then we have to understand that he does not control the entire world. There's scripture after scripture that proves he doesn't even control the entire Middle East. Jordan, Moab, Edom, Mount Seir, they get away from him. Ammon, they get away from him. The ships of Kittim comes against him, okay, so to speak. Okay, the strongest fortresses, if you will. So he has his hands full during this time, okay? He doesn't even control the Middle East, so he doesn't even control the entire world, obviously, okay? And now we get into the mark of the beast. That will be when the beast kingdom comes to power, and then the 10 kings, and then the Antichrist will come, And then at the 3.5-year mark, that's when the mark of the beast will happen. And until that time, we'll just have to watch and see what happens. And then we will understand if it's a microchip or if it's a banner across the head or whatever it may be. It will be a creed to the Antichrist, that is for sure. So friends, I hope this has been helpful for you. It's very important to have these conversations, and I think it's great that people are starting to watch and turn their attention to these prophecies of Revelation, of Daniel, the biblical prophets, looking at the Middle East. And it's very important that it is the ancient biblical world that the biblical prophets are speaking of. As it was in the beginning, it will be at the end. Just like the Lord says, he declares the end from the beginning and from ancient times not yet fulfilled. Friends, I hope this has been helpful for you. We love you. May God bless you. May he keep you. May his face shine upon you and give you his grace. May he lift up his countenance upon you and give you his everlasting shalom. My name is Chadwick Harvey, and this is Faithful Performance.